Welcome to another installment of Conversations Across Generations, sponsored by the Young Ministers Corner of the African American Lectionary. And today we're joined by a very special guest, a very distinguished guest, the Reverend Dr. Virgil Wood, Pastor Emeritus of the Palm Street Baptist Church in Providence, Rhode Island, and a great luminary and lieutenant of the Civil Rights Movement. Welcome, Dr. Wood.
Thank you so much.
Conversation today.
It's a delight to be with you.
Yes, sir. And I'm sure that this will be a productive and organic conversation that will bless our public and young preachers and seasoned preachers across the country.
Praise God.
First, I want to start knowing that you were very influential in the work that the Civil Rights Movement and Dr. King were able to materialize in this country. I want to first start by asking you about your Jesus journey and how your Jesus journey brought you to the movement.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Great question. I love that. I love that question. I know the genius of King was his Jesus journey. And I finally understood King after I understood that. And that's been within the last 10 years. I had that understanding. Once I understood that, and Thurman helped me on that too. Thurman said that we are caught up in religion about Jesus, not the religion of Jesus. Right? And I realized that I was led back by the Holy Spirit at the side of Jesus in the wilderness. And I didn't understand my journey until I had gone through that experience with Jesus. And I found out how he dealt with the demon forces. Whether your theology requires you to see the devil as personified or just an energy or force or whatever, it's real. And it was real in my life. It may well be that the experience had let me really know Jesus. I was frantically working in 2011, getting ready for the dedication of Martin King Memorial. I wanted to make sure that folks who had lesser well-known people also were central in that experience. I had worked myself into a frazzle. I'm in the hospital a week before the August 28, 2011, dying. That's what the doctors told me. My body was shutting down, you know. And they didn't know what was going on. I couldn't figure it out. It was just dead. And the doctors came in one morning and said, we've done every test, all of the MRIs, everything, all the blood work, the heart stuff and all of that. We can't find a thing. We can't find a thing that's wrong. Something we can do for you. I said, are you telling me, doctor, that there's no medical reason for what's happening to me? They said, that's right. There's no medical reason for it. I said, well, I thank you. And when he left, I knew what my problem was. I summoned the devil into my hospital room. And I said to the devil, I'm not holding you responsible for what I chose to believe. Right? I doubted God. And I believed you that I was an old man who was working beyond my own strength. And I was doing all of this myself. And God showed me something. I said, no, let me tell you something, devil. You are a liar. And I believe that ain't your fault. You're supposed to lie. But I ain't supposed to believe. They get the hell out of my hospital room, get the hell out of my life, and don't come back. Right? I'm going to tell you, Brother Willard, within 2 days, my health had come roaring back. And it hasn't let up since. Jesus. I thought that I had really met Jesus. And he had given me my life and my trust in him. I've written a book on In Love We Trust, In God We Trust. But it was academic. Until I really needed what Jesus could do for me that no other force or no other person on earth could do. And I know it was Jesus. You know, there's no other explanation for it. When I allowed Jesus to expel my demons, to help me expel my demons, and to welcome, celebrate, embrace his spirit, the love that casts out fear. I know that. And so my journey with Jesus, I started when I think I was 9 years old when I was baptized. But man, my life, I look back on my life, and at every step of my journey, somebody has been there to give me a little more Jesus. Starting with my mama and my daddy, who were deep in the Lord, you know. My dad was a farmer, and I learned farming from him. I realized now that what I'm doing is farming. Right now, I'm farming. It's amazing. The seasons that God gives. If you're going to harvest something, you got to plant in the right season. You got to get the soil ready. You got to have good seed. That's what Martin gave us. Martin became a hybrid seed of the beloved community. The hybrid seed. All we got to do is plant what we had with Martin. And we'll grow the beloved community and the beloved economy. And that's a Jesus thing for me.
Okay.
And I might say that it was deep and also by my experience of the project on the Jubilee Bible. Okay. American Bible Society published in 1999. When I was 18 years old, 17, I went to college. That summer, before I went to college, the old folks in my community down in Virginia, where I grew up, a little town outside of Charlottesville called Yancey Mills, 12 miles west of Charlottesville, right? 40 black families, right? The old folks said, listen, Uncle Jess is about to leave us. He's up in his 90s. You know, he's failing. His mind is still sharp, but he's failing. Go and interview him and find out, get the history of our little settlement, our struggle. Write it down. Whatever he tells you, just write it down. Man, I spent a whole week with him. It was awesome. From 7 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon with half an hour for lunch. That had been the rhythm of his life. And that was what he said. We'll do this, right? So I'm sitting there with my little notebook, writing. He's talking. And Wednesday morning, I'm writing and he's talking, and all of a sudden I realize I'm hearing something I've never heard before. I'm hearing something that it's he said, I was 10 years old the day the slaves were set free. He said, the day we learned that we've been set free, I was 10 years old. Wow. And he said, the soldiers came up, Union soldiers rolled up on the plantation and said, get all of the slaves together. And finally, after about two hours, they'd gotten everybody together out of the fields and the big house and all of that. We went to the big oak tree, he said, and the guy sitting on his horse reading this big paper. And he said he read it and read it and read it. And he stopped when he was finished and looked at us. And we looked at him and nobody said anything. We looked at the old guru. He didn't say anything. So the young boy he said the young soldier got flustered. And he started reading it again. And said it looked like he was never going to stop reading. And said when he finished reading, he looked at us and said, I don't think you'll understand. This paper says that Mr. Lincoln has set y'all free. He said, nobody moved. And then finally he said, the old guru looked at the soldier with his chin in his hand and said, young man, whatever that is you say Mr. Lincoln done for us, we thank Mr. Lincoln, but we know that it was a great God Almighty that give us the great Jubilee. I want to tell you, brother, that has defined my journey. That week with Uncle Jesse. He was the grandfather of my first cousins who were on the maternal side. And that was a defining moment in my life. And so I pursued that. And it's led me from the oak tree in his backyard, after through my work with Martin, my work with Leon Sullivan, my relationship with Sam Proctor. That's why I'm so insistent that we understand the genius of those three as a trajectory, a leadership trajectory. That the things that we give Martin credit for really belong to Proctor, King, and Sullivan. Okay. When you know all three of their stories, we have everything we need to understand now to go the rest of this journey.
Can you say that? Can you unpack that for us? What's the significance of each?
Right, exactly. Now Proctor went to Crozier in 44 and graduated in 49. King goes to Crozier in 51. Okay. And graduates in 54. Proctor Proctor becomes King's big brother and mentor. A lot of people don't know that when the boycott got started, right, Proctor was the guy who was on the inside of the house, right? Inside of he was the operator from the inside. Now, Proctor, King, and Sullivan all were deep in the Lord and deep in the church. But Proctor operated from inside the government and the university.
Okay.
And when the Montgomery movement was about to stumble because the local insurance companies would not insure those fleets again, Proctor got Lloyd's of London to insure all those cars.
Wow.
People don't know that. It's not well known. When King's house was bombed, Proctor was in the bedroom, slept in the bedroom near the window 2 weeks before that.
Wow.
So there was this thing between them like brothers. There was also a slight sibling rivalry.
Okay.
Sibling rivalry.
Okay.
And I don't think it hurts us to know these little things. I was in Proctor's bedroom. My wife and I, Proctor was sick that day. He was president of Virginia Union now. We had gone to see him, my wife and I. See, my wife grew up on the same street as Proctor.
Okay.
My wife Lily. Fremont Avenue in Norfolk. Proctor's family's at the end of the street, big house. And my wife and her family up the street from him. So Proctor's been dear to us. I followed him at Pond Street Baptist Church in Providence. And he was my mentor in many ways, although there were times when I wasn't in those circles, but there were times when it was very rich.
Okay.
In fact, Proctor gave me one of the greatest personal blessings anybody have ever spoken into my life. And I've never told anybody but my wife. But it was so awesome that I was dumbstruck when I heard. And I've just been living my life trying to live up to it and to understand it, you know. Married my son and his wife. He was their pastor at Addison. So there's been that part of it. Okay, now that's the Proctor side. Proctor also, a lot of people don't know, he was one of the co-founders of the Peace Corps.
Yes.
Co-founder of the anti-poverty work. He and Shriver are joined at the hip. Okay, that's beautiful. That's Proctor. We know the King story. Everyone knows the King story. Except that what they don't realize is that Jesus' connection that ran through all of them that made what King was best known for effective. Right? For example, I went on King's executive board, FCLC board in 60, right? But they started talking about it in 59.
Okay.
I went from Pond Street in 55 to 58, 3 years at Pond Street. My babies were born there. My son and my daughter were born there. I went to Lynchburg in 58 to 63. That's where I joined King and the Civil Rights Movement. I had the Lynchburg Improvement Association. And the Lynchburg Improvement Association had been part of the inspiration of Wyatt Walker. Wyatt Walker is a name that we need to keep remembering because Wyatt's contribution to this whole thing is immense. And I just want to make sure that we understand that the great veterans of this thing, if these were military veterans, everybody would be embracing them and supporting them and stuff. It's a scandal that our community does not do more for those veterans. Than Wyatt Walker, he's been bedridden almost for 3 or 4 years or more. So I don't know. I imagine that's a major strain on resources. And if these were military veterans, somebody would say, listen, we got to put some resources by. Fred Shuttlesworth, I knew some of that story, you know, and he left us last year.
Right.
Okay, so here's Sullivan. Now, Leon Sullivan was a genius. He and Proctor and Sullivan. Proctor, I like to say Proctor was a church-based and an operative within the power structure. Okay. A king was church-based and operative within the street, so to speak. The street. Sullivan was rooted in the church, rooted in the Lord. But Sullivan taught us how to make the elephant dance, the corporate elephant. Sullivan made the elephant dance. Got those 450 preachers. That's a miracle to get 450 preachers to stay on the same page for that whole time. It's almost like the Montgomery miracle. This is the Philadelphia miracle now.
Okay.
And Sullivan and those preachers decided that these major corporations have the big share of their profits based on our patronage, and we just had 1, 2 little dinky jobs, janitors and all that. And Sullivan got these 450 preachers together. They got a consensus about what they were doing, right? A very smart move. Sullivan was really very humble. A lot of people think he was full of it. He wasn't. He was assertive, but he was humble.
Okay.
And they went to the corporations and they laughed at them. They said, just what I just said, 40% of your profit or whatever come from our community, but almost zero jobs. We want to help you. We want to bring it up to equity. Mm-hmm. We're going to help you do that. Well, they laughed at it, right? And then the preachers went back to their pulpits, 450 pulpits, and said, guess what, children? This past week we met with Tasty Cake, and we told them that we wanted some jobs, and they laughed at us. So guess what? This week we're not going to eat the Tasty Cake. When those Tasty Cake drivers came back to those supermarkets on Monday or Tuesday morning to restock the shelves, not a thing had moved from them shelves. Wow. So the CEOs called Dr. Sullivan and said, oh, hey, Dr. Reverend, I think we can meet. And from there on, it's history. Sullivan went on to create the OIC movement. Mm-hmm. That movement is around the globe now. So if we can understand the convergence of the gift of Sullivan, the gift of King, and the gift of Proctor as one trajectory, right? We'll be back on track to resurrect our communities. Our communities are death valleys. And I don't understand it. Brother Francois, I'll be honest with you. I don't understand how we can jump around and shout every Sunday morning. And our members of our own families in jail, young people already in hell. Some Sundays we ought to declare that this Sunday is going to be a mourning Sunday. We're going to mourn for our people who are lost. We ain't going to shout today. We're going to mourn today. We'll shout when we get something else to shout about. When God told Joshua that I want you to march around the cities, don't shout until I tell you. Mm-hmm. Black churches got to stop shouting for a little while and get something to shout about. I know for a fact that across America, so many of our black pastors, their own sons are in prison. Mm-hmm. Some have come out of prison. Some headed there. So if you don't care about folks down the street going to jail, then care about your own household. I just think that if the black churches, I want to see 10,000 pastors in America get on the same page, and we'll turn this thing around. Brother John used to say, if the Negro had as much religion in his head and his heart as he got in his hands and his feet, he'd get free in 2 weeks. I love Brother John. I was a student at Union when White got converted. White Walker. Gardner Taylor was preaching, but Vernon Johns had been there. And Johns was preaching, and he was talking about acting a fool in the pulpit, And it was juicy, as Prophet would say. It was juicy in the chapel that day. And later on, we had a discussion with Dr. John, some student leaders at Virginia Union in the 50. And the young lady said, Dr. John, you were talking about being a fool in the pulpit. Said, what were you doing up there today? He said, I was acting like a jackass. Brother John. He also said another great Brother John saying I love. John said, if our colleges and our churches don't stop miseducating and misreligioning Negroes, they ought to be torn down and the fields plowed in alfalfa seed. Brother John.
Wow. Wow.
But Proctor, King, and Sullivan